Welcome back to Drama 203, lecture number 1. The big question, what is creativity? Now, this is a great book called Creativity. He's got another book called Flow. I will put his name here and then I will pronounce it for you because it's wild. So this is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. That's how it's pronounced. I have practiced this many times. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He's a scientist, he's a philosopher, he's written multiple books on creativity, and this is how he describes it. So the definition that follows from this perspective is creativity is any act, idea, or product that changes an existing domain. And we'll leave it at that. Right? So it's quite simple in a sense. Right? Anything creative is something that kind of changes the status quo. Right? If you do something new or novel or different, like a lot of times people say, oh, it's a very creative idea. And it's not just about the arts. It can be in business. It can be, you've heard the term creative accounting. Not always legal, don't do that. But the idea with creativity is that it's something that is novel. It's different. It changes what has been. So you're looking at something a little bit differently. Now, can anybody be creative? 100%. Creativity is not for a special group of people. You might find that some people might be more creative. That doesn't mean necessarily that they're better, that they're different. It could be their upbringing. It could be how they grew up. It could be culturally. It could be just privilege even, right? Their access to things. It's a big part of this. Making art has a lot to do with that. So everybody can be creative. Now what happens over time is we grow up, we learn sets of rules, especially when we go to school and there are grades and things to achieve. And so creativity kind of gets removed from this process. And that's not always helpful because if you're just doing what is expected or doing the thing that your professor has offered or is given you, what happens when you're done? Right? And you get out into the world and you're just doing the thing that is required. That could be your life. I'm not judging this, but that could be exactly what you need, and that's totally fine. But imagine if you were continuously encouraged to be creative in some way, to take a chance. Like, let's put aside final product, and now let's try and find a new way to do something. Let's change this equation a little bit. So creativity is that. It's anything that changes a kind of settled domain, and domain can mean multiple things, but that's what it is. It's anything. And anyone can be creative. Every single one of you can be creative in some way. Maybe that's been removed from you. Maybe you've had bad experiences where you tried to be creative at one point in time and were shot down. Maybe you got embarrassed. Maybe the people around you didn't get it and you slowly but surely just kind of left that way of thinking. Totally legit, happens all the time. But that's what creativity is. What creativity is not is talent. You have to separate those two things. A lot of times people can look at somebody who might be talented, and I don't love that word. I kind of lean towards, I believe people have facilities towards things, right? If I have friends who are brilliant musicians, and you give them an instrument and in 2 weeks they'll have it figured out. It's just the way their brain is wired, it's just what they do. I have friends who are great at graphic design. I have friends who are much better writers than I am. And I have friends in business who do creative things within their businesses. So, it's not talent. Talent is a thing that kind of gets thrown around a lot. And again, we can look at somebody else and say, oh, they're so much more talented than me. But what does that mean? Because it is all subjective. So a lot of times, the talented person, in quotes, I will always put that in quotes, might have had better luck. Again, different kinds of privilege and access to things. We're in a world of Nepo babies at this point. Right? Have they struggled just as hard as somebody who knew absolutely no one and has, fought their way through the mountains of things to become famous? It's a different thing. So talent is kind of questionable, and talent doesn't ultimately mean creativity. Anyone can be creative. We've all heard of, let's say, the term folk art, right? Which in art circles maybe gets considered at times low art. And there's a whole other thing with that. It's an entirely different class of high art and low art. What is important and what is kind of crafty. Now, if you're knitting and making folk art or even just crafting things, is that not creative? Even if you're following a pattern, you're still going through it and doing things. And I would wager most people who do that kind of work, or do that kind of, even if it's a hobby or if it's a small business, they might start with the pattern, and then maybe over time they start doing their own thing, right? As they get comfortable with the materials, and then they start going and start doing their own things. And isn't that, let's stick this in the arts for a moment, just in the arts. Isn't that how all artists begin? If you're a musician and you're in a band, usually the first band you're in, not always, but generally the first band you're in will be a cover band. Or if you're a solo acoustic player or something, you're going to go to open mics and you're going to sing other people's songs. That's a form of practice, right? You're getting used to the instrument, you're getting used to the mechanics of music and songwriting, and then eventually you start writing your own material. Let's say you're an artist, a painter. Usually, not always, but usually you might start by copying famous works or other people's works for technique or for learning how paint works and brushstrokes and all that kind of stuff. So that's, is that being creative, or is that copying, or is that covering? It doesn't matter. The doing is the important part. And eventually, if you allow it, creativity will arrive. So all of you can be creative, 100%. Now, I mentioned in the intro video that I wrote a book on creative process called No Shortcuts, the 5 chambers. And I created, yes, the Wu-Tang reference is on purpose. So, and here it is. The 5 chambers are these series of guides. They're not rules, because I don't like those books, or you see it online or Instagram where it's like, these are the 5 rules of writing, or these are the 5 rules of make. That's not helpful, especially if you can't do those rules. And now are you not able to be creative now because you can't follow those rules? So I created a set of guides, just ways of thinking about art that can maybe, hopefully, propel you into taking some chances or reattaching to your own creativity and creative process. So the 5 chambers are as follows. Don't pre-create, that's number 1. And I'll go into detail about all of these. Right? Don't pre-create, number 1. Number 2, instinctual negation. And we'll get into those details. 3, justified resistance. 4, fail more and the short-term ego. And 5, acquired knowledge and the subconscious. So let's dig into these a little bit. So when I talk about not pre-creating something, what might happen, and it might have happened when I posted the intro video, right? And you heard about the final assignment and immediately you got an idea. Maybe not, but maybe you did. Boom, I'll do this. Right? That's pre-creation, right? You get a prompt and boom, you have an idea. And what happens is a lot of times when we do this kind of thing is that becomes the only idea that you're ever going to look for. Whether you're busy, you don't have time, you're not really interested. So you'll come up with one idea and then you'll force that through to the end of the process. Not just in the arts. So this idea of pre-creation. So any idea that you have in your head is perfect. It's there, boom, you can see it, it's all there. Translating what's in your head to something tangible in the real world, what we're going to do with the final assignment, that's a process. That's a different thing. And I talk about this in the book, but in one of my performance creation classes, I brought in a puppet maker. And I asked him to kind of show the students how might you begin making a puppet. And the thing he said, which stuck with me for a long time, was the image of the mask or puppet that you have in your head is probably like 99% not going to be the thing that is going to arrive in the real world. And that could be just skill set, availability to materials, what we were working with, because there's this translation. So if you only stick with your pre-created idea, the thing in front of you is always wrong. And how is that a way to create anything? So what you have to do is, what I suggest, and what I, as an example in these classes, and this handout will be up on D2L with all of the 5 chambers, is I ask students, you'll inevitably have a spark, an initial idea. Great, wonderful, 100% accurate. Now take that and put it on, I'm going to put a shelf here, put it on a metaphorical shelf. Right? Leave it there. It's fine. You don't have to discard it. It's there. Now, come up with 3 or 4 more ideas. Anything. Why this is important is, let's say you only come up with 1 idea. Well, how do we know that's any good? You're not comparing it to anything. You don't have any kind of frame of reference, right? What if you get, halfway, 3/4 down the process, and all of a sudden you realize that it's not working. And now you're stuck because it's the only idea you have. So what you want to do is you want to have that wonderful idea and then come up with 3 or 4 more, or 5 or 6 or 27, doesn't matter, and investigate them, play with them, look at them. What might happen is that one of those interesting ideas is going to be more exciting than your first one, right? And if you stopped at the first one, you would have never discovered it. Another thing that could happen is parts of that first idea could mix really well with some of these new ideas that you're coming up with. Totally awesome. What also could happen is, after you've investigated multiple different ideas, you might return to the first one and say, yep, that's the one. Now, it's not the same idea, and I'll explain. By going through a process of investigating other ideas, this idea has changed. You have also changed, whether that's 5 minutes or 5 days or 5 weeks. You're growing, you're learning, you're seeing new things. So you're going to be looking at that initial idea somewhat differently. So if you pre-create, you end up getting stuck within that mindset, and you're going to be forcing things. You're going to be shoehorning ideas that don't fit because that's the only idea you have. And honestly, you might be under a time crunch. That's totally legit. But can you put a little time and let go of that original idea somewhat? Because you'll get stuck at some point. It won't do what you want it to do. It's all about choices. Now, if you have one idea that's still up here on the shelf, and that's the only idea you have, your choices are going to be very limited about what you can do and where you can go with it. Right? If you have a multitude of ideas, right, you can grab things from here and there and over there and put that over there, or bring this back into the mix. And now you're making different kinds of choices. You're making choices based on different things, more like ideas at your fingertips. And so you're making more creative choices as opposed to choices made for time crunch, or because you have to get it in, or it's the only ideas you have and you're getting frustrated. So allow that pre-created idea. It's not bad. I'm not saying discard it and ignore it completely, but I'm saying just put it aside for a moment. Go for a walk, right? Figure something out, come up with some new ideas, and then you can revisit it if you want, but don't just get stuck in that first idea. The second chamber, instinctual negation. This is something that plagues all artists, but it might also plague you in business or whatever, and it's usually based in fear. So you might come up with a new idea and you will instinctually say no. Just negate. Nope, it's not good enough. You'll come up with another idea. Nope, it's not good enough. Right? And you'll constantly do this by instinct. What those instincts are based on, I don't know. Now, we all have instincts, right? Some are good, some are bad. Don't run in traffic. Great instinct. Don't do that, right? Don't put your hand on the hot oven burner, right? We learn that, and those are good instincts. But sometimes with instincts, let's say you tried, again, mentioned before, you've tried something and maybe it didn't work out, or you felt silly, and now, so that's kind of built into the process now. So when you have the intention of, oh, what's this? You remember that feeling and you stop. What can happen as you grow is that these instincts kind of solidify and they just become kind of automatic, right? You see that, nope, don't like that, not gonna go there, right? To bring it outside of the arts, it could be as simple as food. Maybe 5 years ago you had a certain kind of meal and it was awful, and you're like, no, I never want to have that again. Now that was one experience. 5 years later, you're a different person. You've tried different things, whatever you've done, and maybe you could go back and revisit that. Maybe it's fine. Maybe you still don't like it, but there's no risk involved, really. So these kinds of instincts get baked in and we resist, right? This is not great for the creative process or for creativity. Creativity is new. Creativity is finding a different way to look at things. And if we're saying no to a lot, it's tough. There's also another side to this too. I was working with a bunch of writers recently, and I asked the question of, how many of you think that writer's block is a real thing? Everybody put up their hand. Writer's block doesn't exist. And I will tell you why. It's not writer's block, it's judgment. You are judging the ideas. You are resisting the ideas that are coming to you, and you're judging them based on some arbitrary mental instinctual thing that you have. So what the way to get out of instinctual negation is to, if you have an idea, let it live. Investigate it, see where it might go. It might be a bad idea. There's no good or bad in any of this. It's just a different thing. It might not work, but you won't know that until you try. But a lot of times what can happen is you try something new, you try something different, and it might not totally work, but there's something in there that you can take out and put into something else. There's a sliver of something. And those little slivers can make up something quite amazing. But if you've negated them all, if you've resisted them all, they don't exist. So don't pre-create, right? Don't hold on to those initial images, but then also don't resist instinctually all of the things that come to you. Now, as a writer, and I'm always handing my work to other people to, either make the film or produce the play, or just if I'm in multiple drafts, am I going in the right direction? It's exposing. It's vulnerable to do that. And a lot of times it's in the kind of DNA, somebody might give me a note back and immediately I get defensive and I resist. Instinctually, I just kind of stop. Nope. That was when I was younger. Over time, in working with these chambers, I still have the reaction. I still defend, but I don't act on it. I just pause. 90% of the time, there's something within the note that was given to me that is useful or interesting or a new way to approach the work, right? Sometimes it's just a bad note. It's totally fine. But often it's something new, it's something different. So the new and different kind of, oh wait, I didn't think of that, so it can't be any good. Pause, just let it exist. Let the feeling pass, because usually it's instinctual. You're not thinking about it, it's just happening. And then see where it goes. The third chamber, justified resistance. We are all masters of this. We instinctually negate and we resist different kinds of ways of approaching work, and then we can justify it in the most amazing ways. I know a friend who is a pretty incredible musician and great songwriter, unique, has their own kind of voice and sound. They used to be in bands when they were much younger, kind of metal stuff. Now they're into kind of more singer-songwriter type vibe. But they've played in bands, they've done that. But this new version of them, which is I think a more authentic version of them, it's never been recorded, rarely plays, maybe some open mics at a festival somewhere, that's it. And they kind of don't do anything with it. There's no judgment on this. I'm not saying this is good or bad. It's an example. And I asked once, I said, you're good. You are really good. Why don't you do something with it? And I got this incredible story of, this is not for me. This is just the way I want to work. I don't really care if anybody hears my work, all this stuff. And it made totally logical sense, what he was saying. I didn't know whether that was a truth or whether that was a story designed to convince himself that this is where he wanted to go. And sometimes, again, it's based in fear. It's scary to succeed sometimes. It's very scary to fail. And so instead of even doing that, we just resist and we can justify it afterwards. And the justifications can be pretty amazing. And we'll do it to ourselves. And if we say that justification a lot, we start to believe it as well. I'm not saying that no justification is correct. Sometimes it's very accurate. But a lot of times we'll tell ourselves, no, I'm not into that. No, I don't like that. Right? No, and I don't like it for these reasons. And it'll just keep going and keep going. And we say it enough times, we'll believe it. So we have to be careful with those things. And again, I'm not saying that all of these things are bad. What the book is trying to help with creative process is to allow you to pause and think about it, right? If you're instinctually negating something, chamber 2, why? Just ask why. Be curious. Chamber 3, if you are justifying the resistance, what is the justification? And is it accurate? Because maybe you decided this 10 years ago, but you're a different person now. You've grown, you've experienced, you've lived. So revisit those things and to kind of double check. So you're not just resisting and negating everything because you decided years ago that this is not for you. Right? Messing with our identities can get tricky. We like to kind of believe who we are and say like this is, and believe what we're about, but we change every day. So we have to allow that to exist and ask questions, right? Instead of just being so sure, this is who I am. This is the kind of person I am. That's great. Good for you. Every now and then, just double check, right? Is it still that? Or have you negated things in your life or in your creativity or in anything and justified it because that's who you decided you were back then? And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. Again, anything I'm talking about, there is zero judgment on either side of this. It's just something to think about. Okay. Chamber 4. Fail more and the short-term ego. If you're in school, failing is not really what you're supposed to be doing. If you're on the job, failing is not what you're supposed to be doing, right? But you learn so much from failure. And there will be a reading later on in the course that will make sense of this. And I'll talk about it more often. And so the quote is, and again, when I'm talking about success and failure, those are kind of abstract terms. Everyone will have a different definition of that. So success doesn't mean monetary, and failure doesn't mean, something else. It's just, these are just terms. You have to decide what they mean to you. So there's this quote in business is that the successful person fails more than the failure. It's a wild thing to unpack, right? The successful person fails more. And if you unpack that, so what happens with the successful person is that they attempt something and it doesn't work. So they, shrug it off and they attempt a new thing, right? Well, that didn't work either. Maybe parts of it did, but as a whole, didn't really work. Then they try another thing and another. And eventually, if you keep trying something, there's a good chance, there's no guarantee, but there's a good chance that something's going to hit. Or the accumulation of all of this failure, of learning mistakes and then correcting them the next time and building and building and building to the point where you kind of have a really solid understanding of the thing you're trying to do. And so eventually, with enough failure, you can get to a point where you succeed. The opposite side of that is the failure, in quotes, try something, it doesn't work. They say, see, I failed, and they never do it again. Or they just blow off the whole thing and go do something else. They just stop, right? The failure stops. The successful person keeps going and keeps failing. So you have to embrace that idea of failure. And there's risk in that, there's fear in that. It's not comfortable. And you have to, you have your own lives and you have to figure out where failing might be acceptable. But if you don't take chances, how do you know anything's going to work? Again, if you just do what's expected of you, you'll do fine. And maybe fine is where you're at, totally legit, no judgment. But if you never take a risk, how do you know what you're made out of or what you could be what's the possibilities of your own existence? So that fail more is also very much kind of a learning incubator, right? With each failure, you can now look at the wreckage, for lack of a better word, the wreckage of what you've done and say, that worked, that didn't. Wow, that was giant. That was a huge mistake. This is really cool. I'm taking that with me, right? And so you have something to look at. Let's say you try something and you succeed immediately. What have you learned? Because every situation is also very different, right? Every time you attempt something, it's different. So if you try and recreate what you did to succeed, is it going to work the second time? It could be an entirely different thing, and nothing that you tried the first time, which you succeeded in, is going to translate over to the second time, and now you failed, and now you're confused. The other part of that is sometimes success is a fluke, especially in the arts, and it could be anywhere, right? We can talk about privilege. We can talk about access to things. We can talk about financial barriers. We can talk about cultural barriers. We can talk about all these things, right? To succeed, so many things have to line up correctly. And a lot of times the success is earned, but also there's a good amount of luck and timing that play a part in that. Or it's a fluke, totally legit, right? So what happens, how do you recreate a fluke? How do you recreate timing? You can't. So if you've just succeeded and that's all that matters to you, you could get very, very frustrated and there could be a lot of failure in the future. But if you kind of embrace the idea of failure, you can learn a lot more, you will be a lot more well-rounded, and you will have probably a better opportunity down the road to end up succeeding at something. Now, the second part of that chamber, short-term ego. This is important. The long-term ego, what I call the long-term ego, is what we understand about ego. It's arrogance, it's I'm amazing, I'm so good, I'm better than you, I can do anything, look at me, I'm special. That's long-term ego. A lot of times that's kind of a push, right? We're overcompensating, so we act a certain way. Or we've just had a blessed life and anything that we do, happens to us and look at us, we're so amazing. Long-term ego. Long-term ego does not help you in creativity. The short-term ego, what I've called the short-term ego, gives you enough confidence, gives you enough courage to just say to yourself, you know what? I could totally pull that off. I could do this. Right? Why not? Why not me? Just those little kind of sayings like, why not me? I could do this. And then it doesn't work, let's say, in our scenario, right? You've had the little voice, the voice said, you could do this. You try, it doesn't work. It's short term because you just like, oh, okay, that didn't work. And then you look at what happened and then you just move on to there's a new thing. So it's not just, the long-term ego can't allow failure. It will hold on to that failure as this thing to never do again. And it won't allow risk. It won't allow leaving comfort zones. It won't allow for creativity. The short-term ego wants to play, right? So it goes out there and says, you could do this, and then it doesn't work, and then sees the next thing and goes, you know what? You could totally do this. Go for it. And then you keep going, right? It's just on to the next, and you're learning all the way along. You're gaining knowledge all the way along. It's great. Something that I talk about just as an addendum to Chamber 4, when I talk to students and when I talk to artists especially, you have to exist and what I've called a confident humility. And I'll explain. So you have to enter rooms with some form of confidence. You were meant to be there, you're allowed to be in the room, you've earned your place in the space. Totally legit. but you don't know everything. And other people in the room might have really amazing ideas, and maybe they're more educated, or maybe they have a lot more experience, right? So you have to understand that, yes, you deserve to be in the space, but be humble about it and ask questions. If you're unsure of something, it's okay to be unsure. When I direct shows, one of the big things that I remind myself constantly, because we're humans, so we forget, we want to be right and we want to be confident. The thing I remind myself every time kind of entering a rehearsal, if somebody asks me a question and I don't have the answer to it, I don't make something up. I just say, I don't know. I'll look into that. That's it. Great question. I'm not sure. Let me figure something out, right? So instead of lying to somebody or making something up, which people can get a sense that you're doing that, you just say, I don't know. Let's find out. Great question. What that does within the room, or let's say with coworkers or fellow students, is that people look at you and say, oh, okay, like there's obviously, you deserve to be in the room, but you're not gonna, lord yourself over everyone and with this arrogance. And if you can say you're not sure, so can I. And then we can have dialogue, and then we learn things, and then we grow and we grow and grow. So try and approach most of your work with a confident humility. You deserve to be in the room, but you don't know everything, and there's still a lot to learn. So that's fail more and the short-term ego, chamber 4. Chamber 5, acquired knowledge and the subconscious. Everything you do, see, smell, taste, everything gets kind of recorded somewhere. It's in your subconscious. It's an experience, right? This is what we're talking about, gaining experience. It's doing things and then having that experience. Sometimes we can even break it down to like muscle memory. But what that is just all this information in your subconscious. Now, there's a problem, is that you can't access your subconscious. You can't physically tap in, and see what's going on there. You can't consciously do it. And that's where ideas come from. They come from that subconscious place where they have all these thoughts, these things, these stuff is floating around in space, and then they smash into each other, and boom, an idea. How that idea came to be, who knows? What got smashed together to make this work? Who knows? But without acquiring that knowledge, you're kind of emptying out your I call it a file cabinet. So acquiring knowledge is not just about the thing that you're working on. So let's go back to the arts. I'm a writer, primarily. If I only read books about writing, if I only talk to people about writing, if I only try and do exercises about writing, totally legit, that could be very helpful. But what I like to do is look at books about painting and look at books about architecture, or go and walk around a museum, or just go for a walk in nature. Anything that you're seeing and grabbing can be fuel for creativity. But if you narrow your focus, that what you have access to is going to be a little limited. So experience things, and that's a way of life, but it's also a way of art and creativity. Look at different things. A lot of times, especially, let's say in the arts, or, in different kind of subsects and cultures, you could say like, oh, I'm into death metal, so I can't possibly like this pop song. But why not? There could be some amazing things in that pop song, right? I like this kind of art. Conceptual, abstract, modern art leaves me empty and I hate it because it's just stupid. Well, now you've just dismissed an entire thing. Can you do that? Probably not. When I was younger, I was also the guy who hated everything. I was a bit of an asshole. I would go to a show and I would find these little mistakes, and it's like, how come, like, look at that. Why did they get away? Why didn't they think about that? And it was a lot of effort. And it was a lot of energy to kind of be so negative all the time. And I didn't like it, and it was no fun. So I made a promise to myself, made a deal, that no matter what I was seeing, and you can kind of get a sense if something's going to be good or not within the first 5-10 minutes. So if I got that feeling of like, oh, it's going to be a long night, I couldn't get mad, and I couldn't disconnect. I had to stay present in that moment, but I had to be looking for something that made me curious, that I thought was really cool, that was like a really great idea. And knowing and convincing, like, if you look, you will find something interesting. I have stolen light cues from a really awful show, but they did a thing and it's like, oh, that's interesting. I like that. I'm going to use that next time. I'll do my version, but I like that. Now, if I dismissed the entire show, I would never have seen that. Same thing with music, same thing with art, same thing with any kind of creative endeavor. If you dismiss an entire genre, you're missing out. Now, that doesn't mean you have to like the thing that you're paying attention to. And I tell this to my students all the time, especially during the year when we go through Shakespeare. I don't like Shakespeare. He's very, very good. He's an amazing writer. His language is phenomenal, right? He's created so many things and influenced so much. That's great. Good for him. So we need to study him. I don't need to like him. I don't need to enjoy it. I don't sit around reading Shakespeare or watching Shakespeare. I'm never going to say it's garbage, because it's not. It's just not for me. So we tend to constantly try and put opinions on things, right? Oh, yeah, I don't like this. The thing I hate the most is when somebody says, well, what's your favorite song from this band? It's like, I don't know, this week? Like, it changes, because I'm a living human being with different thoughts. So allow the accumulation of knowledge, if you could separate or change knowledge to experience, right? Just experience things. You don't have to like or dislike them. Just let it exist. I will guarantee you, if you can do that, you will find new things. It might not be the thing you're experiencing right in that moment, but it might spark something down the road. It could create a new passion, or it might allow you to see the thing that you've kind of been dismissing in a new light, and then like, hey, wait a second, I actually kind of really like this. Surprise yourself. But if you dismiss it and you kind of say, no, I don't want that, you're not acquiring any knowledge, and you could be missing out on a whole bunch of really interesting ideas. So allow that accumulation of knowledge to exist. And it's going to happen in your subconscious. Just put it back there. You have it. It'll show up at some point. So those are the 5 chambers. Don't pre-create, instinctual negation, justified resistance, fail more and the short-term ego, and acquire knowledge in the subconscious. If you can wrap your head around those things and just let them exist and reconnect with them, they will help in the creation of work, they will help your creativity, and they will kind of give you, the idea is to give you permission to take some chances, to leave your comfort zone, take a few risks, and see what could happen. Let's talk about Prince. Bit of a segue there. So, I'm a giant Prince fan. This book is ginormous, talks about all of his songs. And Prince is fascinating to me, whether you like his music or not, whatever. He was, rest in peace, he was a kind of perfect specimen of creativity. It was incredible what he could do. And there's stories, I've read all the books and I've listened to all the music, and he was so prolific. And he just created. He was, and one of his longtime engineers, Susan Rogers, talks about this, where like he was just a conduit, like and it's not coming from God, it's coming from his subconscious, just to create a flow where some of us resist or push back, or we're never allowed to express ourselves, right? We kind of then shut down some of these filters, and so the creativity can never really escape. He would call it, and people have called this the flow state, where he would just get into a zone and just the ideas kept going, right? Kept going. The fun part about this for me, and also why I like talking about this to students, is that nothing Prince did, it'll be a bold statement, but stay with me. Nothing Prince did was perfect. And you read some of the books on how he put these tracks together and the way he worked in the studio, and you get a real sense of that. And even if you listen to the albums, right, they are solid tracks. Like, these are amazing pop songs and some weird experimental things sometimes. but they're, well put together. They work, everything's there. But if you really listen to them, they're a little messy too. And that's exciting. And why I bring this up is because every time I start a new class, especially about creativity, I ask the students, how many of you are or consider yourselves to be perfectionists or struggle with perfectionism and everything has to be perfect or it's no good? And a lot of people put up their hands. And what happens though is that no one is ever happily a perfectionist. No one sits there it's sheepishly kind of like, yeah. And so there's it's a struggle. And then, I usually follow up with, how's that working for you? And why I talk about this is because perfection is boring. And it's also impossible to make, because it's subjective, really. Especially in the arts. Let's stick with the arts for now. How do you make a perfect work of art? That's a subjective opinion, right? And if you got to see something that you felt was perfect, or hear something you felt was perfect, you would never need to see or hear it again because it lives perfectly in your head exactly how it was. It's boring. It's also impossible because as human beings, if we consider ourselves perfectionists, you're constantly moving the goalposts further and further and further. That's what you do, right? You get to a point where you say, okay, if I do this, then it will be perfect. And then you get to that point and then you look at it and no, it's not good enough. And then you keep going and you keep going and you keep going. So you never actually succeed at anything and nothing is ever perfect. And if we want to kind of follow that thinking down the rabbit hole, that turns into, I'm not good enough, nothing I do is good enough because I can never be perfect. It's not a good place to live. So what I've tried to do, and Prince was a big kind of eye-opener for me because I would read these stories of how he would work in the studio. And basically this is how he would put a song together because he, especially in the early years, he did all of this himself. He had an engineer in the studio working the board, and then he would play all the instruments. So he would come in, I got an idea for a song, make sure the tape's rolling. He was not a pleasant person to work with. So, if you're the engineer, you got to be ready. And he would walk through the control room, and then he would get into the studio, and then he would lay down a drum track or two. And there was no click track, there was no sheet music. This was in his head. This was the song, and he would play the song, just the drums, as he imagined it, and he would do that. Boom, finish the drum track, great. Did you have that? Sometimes it would be one take, maybe two. He didn't like to do multiple takes. And I mean, he was exceptional as a musician, but still, that's rare. And then he would jump on the bass and he would lay the bass down. Then he would pick up his guitar and do the guitar work. And then he would do the keyboards and the layer. And a lot of these songs had multiple layers, and he would just keep building and building and building. And then when it came time to lay his vocals, the engineer was asked to set up a microphone on top of the board because he knew how to run all the equipment as well. And then she was asked to leave. He worked with a lot of female engineers. And he would do the vocals in the control room himself alone on top of the board, punching everything in, doing what he needed to do. A lot of times, and there's stories of these engineers who have written books, and he would lay down a track and the engineer's like, well, that was a mess. Like, oh, we're obviously going to be doing that again. And they'd be like moving towards the tape machine or moving towards a thing, whatever. And he'd be like, no, it's great. Let's move on. Right? Because it wasn't about laying down a perfect track, especially in those years, 70s and 80s. There were bands that would spend up to 2-3 weeks on like just drum sound within a studio. That's it. Just hitting a drum for 2 or 3 weeks, going through everything. It would be mind-numbing. And then they still get it, they probably get a good drum sound, but did they need to spend 3 weeks on it? Probably not. So what Prince was doing though is that he also knew that he had more songs coming. He didn't have time. Right? He couldn't fine-tune things meticulously like over days because a lot of times he would show up to the studio, record and mix that song all in a day. Now a day for him is, 24 to 36 hours, but it's just one. So it wouldn't be like, okay, let's lay down the tracks for these 4 songs and then we'll come back to them. One song at a time, let's go, 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 go. And because of that, a lot of it is rough. There's messiness here and there, especially in the early stuff. To the point where one of his albums, I believe it was either Controversy or Dirty Mind, I'll try and find out and put it here. It was a demo. He did it in his home studio, and it was rough, but he liked the way it sounded. So that was it. So if someone like Prince, who is just so prolific and who creates so much, could do that, why can't we? Right? It's not about perfection. It's about the feel of something. It's about the style of something. When you see an abstract work of art, look at a Basquiat, a Jean-Michel Basquiat painting, and tell me that that is in any way perfect. But there's a feeling, there's a response, there's an energy to it, and that's what human beings respond to. So when you're putting together a school project or where you're doing something at work, ask yourself, does this need to be perfect or does it need to be good? And so I've played a little word game on myself. I substitute the word perfect for the word precise. Be a precisionist. You can be precise about tasks that you need to do, right? I need to do a new draft of this play. I will be precise with what I'm focusing on. Not perfect, precise. And those are achievable things that you can do, right? I'm going to be precise with this new layer of paint. I'm going to be precise with this document that I have to fill in for work. I'm going to be precise with this. Precise means focused and you're giving care and attention to what you're doing. But you don't have to worry about being perfect. If you're precise, you'll get it right. It'll be there. And so it's an achievable thing that you can then build on, where perfection is this weird amorphous thing that is never achievable and is also very, very boring. So try and let go of perfection and be precise. So when we're dealing even with our final project or a big project, right? Don't try and make anything perfect. We don't have time for that. Try and be precise with your tasks. That's it. And then you can knock them off and achieve things. And then that feeling of achieving a task is positive. And that gives you energy. And so you can achieve the next task and then the next task. And maybe sometimes you don't achieve it as precisely as you want, but that's okay because we weren't trying for perfect. So the down isn't this into the ditch, I have failed miserably. It's just, okay, well, that didn't work out so well. Let's go back to it, right? It's a way of kind of working yourself through this process psychologically to help finish tasks, because finishing is important. I gave kind of my version of the 5 chambers that I wrote about in the book, let's go back to Prince. There are things that people talk about with Prince that kind of allowed him to be successful in what he does. I don't agree with all of them, but I want to share a few of them with you. The first one, which is controversial, work fast. Now, not everyone can. Right? I don't read fast. It takes me a while to get through something. So, certain things I like to take my time on. I think what they mean by work fast is don't just sit there and agonize over minutia in these small little moments, because it's layer upon layer. So just get through the layer. You can come back to it. Get through the layer. You can come back to it. In a way, it's telling you not to overthink the thing you're doing. Right? Just go, see what happens. Because again, short-term ego, doesn't work, do it again. Right? So try not to overthink what you're doing. Just do, see what happens. Number 2, the one thing I just talked about, you got to finish stuff. So the way Prince worked was he would come in the morning with a song and he wouldn't leave the studio till it was done. And what he could do, and he brought tapes back and remixed and then maybe added things later on. But in that moment, it was about getting through it, because the next morning he's showing up with a new song. So he's got to be finished with the one he just did. So just finish the things that you start. Number 3 for this Prince article is, again, no perfection. Just if it feels right, it's right. End of story. Perfection is boring. Don't worry about it. So just go with how it feels. And you can listen to a lot of bands. Not so much now because we have quantization as far as music goes, and we have, auto-tune and all that, where people just don't want any mistakes. But if you listen to a lot of the great songs out there, and even a lot of the beautiful art, it's got mistakes in it. The mistakes are what makes it human. The mistakes are what makes it vibrate with us emotionally. The fourth one, which I wholeheartedly endorse, is make a lot of work, especially for creativity. This is very important. Just make a lot. And what I tell students a lot of times, and it confuses them sometimes, is that make a lot of bad art. There's an artist named John Baldessari. I'll put a picture of him here. This is one of his refrains: make a lot of bad art. Because if you make a lot of bad art, there's a good chance that some of that is going to be really, really interesting. But if you only try and make good art, you will end up frustrated and you will not make anything. You won't finish anything because it's not good enough. Nope. If you just make art. One, what you're doing is that you're exercising your artistic muscles and your creative muscles, which is very important. And two, you're learning along the way. Every time you do something is another opportunity for knowledge. So if you make a lot, some of that's going to be really interesting. But if you try to only do one good thing, you will get frustrated. The next one is interesting. The way it's described is rest and reflect, right? This is important too. If you're just working, eventually you will run out of energy. You will run out of ideas just because your mind and your body are tired. It's all one big organism. So no matter how much you're working, and this, for students especially, and I try and tell my first years all the time, make sure that you're organizing your assignments and make sure you can see the things ahead of you so you can give yourself time in moments to rest. Right? If you don't rest, you're going to burn out, you're going to lose your ideas, and you're going to probably hate the thing that you're working on. So rest also gives you time to reflect on whatever it is that you're creating. When I'm working on a project or if I'm producing a show, I need to spread out the rehearsal process so I can have a day or two in between, bulk rehearsal days, so I can reflect and kind of try and understand what I experienced, what I just saw. And with that rest, I'm going to get new ideas along the way because my body will be rested, my mind will be rested, and I'll be excited to get back into it. But if it's go, go, go all the time, things get rough. And the last thing, which is very much Prince because he had a huge vault of all the songs that he did over time, is that, and I kind of translate it for our purposes, ideas can last forever, right? I've talked about this with, when I've written so many scripts and some of them have never been read. I've got plays that have never been produced. And even if I've written them 20 years ago, they're not gone. They don't disappear. They don't not exist anymore. I can bring them back. I can rewrite them. I can update them. I can, if I really like the concept. So whatever ideas you have creatively, for the most part, there's no time limit. So ideas and creative thinking is kind of timeless for you. But it's a practice. You need to kind of figure yourself out within it. So that's Prince. There's my Prince rant and I do this in every one of my classes. So let's wrap up video number 1. The 5 chambers, there's a document up on D2L, give it a read. I talked a lot about what was written in there. It's directly from the book, but it's a guide that can maybe help you within this class as we start digging into those projects, especially when you got to start making your video. It can help you, maybe ease some tension or relax you a little bit or give you new ideas. So give that a read up on D2L. So the first quiz that's going to be coming up the end of next week after the video, after the second lecture, will comprise of these 2 videos and, well, this one and the one next week and the reading. So that's all you got to be paying attention to. But also start thinking ahead to what this creative troll is. What does it look like? Right? Don't make it look like this. Like, what does yours look like, feel like? And maybe you don't even know what it looks like, but you know what it sounds like. Can you put down, a monologue from your creative troll that's telling you not to do things? What can you do? So start investigating that. And that's for nobody's eyes but yours, so you can be messy, you can make a vision board. I don't know what you want to do, but you can just put ideas out there. But start thinking about that. Don't wait till, 2-3 weeks from now when you got to hand something in. start thinking about it, right? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? What does it tell you? What does it do to you? Is there a physical sensation? Does it make you angry? Does it make you sad? What is it? So let's move forward now and think about creativity and think about, let me throw a question out to you over the next week or whenever you watch this. And this has nothing to do with any kind of quiz or anything, but it's just a question for you to think about. Are there areas in your life, are there parts of your life where you feel or you wish you could be more creative? And if so, and maybe not for everybody, but if so, are there ways that you could take steps to be more creative? And why aren't you being more creative? So a whole bunch, I said one question, there's three. So just let that marinate in your brain for over the next few weeks and see where that goes. So that's going to wrap it up for video number 1. I will see you next Tuesday. Have a great week.